Hello everyone, welcome to our episode 7 of the T-shirt transfer paper power half hour. My name is Douglas DeWitt, product manager here at Condé Systems Incorporated, located in beautiful Mobile, Alabama. Welcoming you to today's show, which is a part 2, a continuation of the show that we did 2 weeks ago, which is focusing on working with predominantly white graphics and applying them to dark garments. Now, in the last episode, I covered some tips and tricks in the TransferRIP and how to set up your heat press so that you get better results transferring white designs to dark garments. Now, the last episode, we basically worked with vectorized designs. And in today's episode, part 2, we're going to carry that momentum over and work with some bitmap photographs, give you my tips and tricks on how to do more successful bitmaps where you have a predominant amount of white, including black and white portraits. We'll cover that topic today. But before we get started, you know, this is the T-shirt transfer paper power half hour. We've got to pay the power bill. I wanted to tell everyone about the flash sale that we are running on Forever Flex Soft No Cut vinyl that's compatible with color laser printers, color laser copiers, even monochrome laser printers. It is a self-weeding vinyl that you could use to decorate all sorts of materials. You could use to decorate cotton, cotton poly blends, even 100% polyester, and some hard substrates. Now, the flash sale that we have is running through the end of the month. All you have to do is click the banner on our website, condé.com or dietrans.com. It'll take you right to the page. Now, the special won't appear until you put the product in your shopping cart. But to give you guys a heads up to let you know, our packs of 8.5 by 11, 25 sheets are available for $50. Our packs of 25 sheets, 11 by 17, are available for $100 on this flash sale, and that price still includes free Condé delivery within the continental U.S. So you can't beat it. You can do some real neat and interesting things like decorate tote bags using a distress font. You could even use it to do photographic reproductions like, you know, my favorite monkey shot in space, bright rose wood and metallic rose gold. Isn't that cool? So yeah, it's flex soft material. Just to let you know, we even have our sample packs on sale, $50 plus free delivery. Go to our website, check it out. And of course, can't pay the bills without letting you know about the Road to Sublimation Success, the new book available co-authored by David Gross. Let you know, Valentine's is coming up. You may have a husband, wife, significant other that's into sublimation. No better way to say I love you than with sublimation knowledge provided in this book. The Road to Sublimation Success, co-authored by David Gross, available on Amazon and on download through Kindle. All right, so now that we've paid the bills, let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to do some bitmap photographs with predominantly white in, and we're going to go through my tips and tricks in the TransferRIP on how you need to set up these graphics so that you get more consistent weeding results and better overall designs. Let me call Mission Control. Sprite, can you get me into the TransferRIP?
Sure can.
All right, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. First graphic I'm going to work with is this graphic that I found on the internet that I thought was pretty cool. It's a transparent octopus taking at very deep depths. So let me go ahead and get this queued up here. Because what I love about this photograph is the predominant amount of black that's in the design. Not that it was done intentionally. This is just the way that water looks miles underneath the ocean. But a pretty cool graphic here, I would say. So normally whenever I'm dealing with a bitmap photograph, the first thing I want to do is adjust my brightness. In the TransferRIP, I always want to bump it up at least 2 or 3 points. And that's just because whenever we go from one medium to another, bitmaps tend to print out a little darker. So I'm just going to liven it up a bit there. And I also want to adjust my saturation. I want to really bring out those blue tentacles. Normally my formula is for every point of brightness I adjust 2 points in the saturation. Now, what we want to do is get rid of all this background black as well as most of the black within here. So what I'm going to do, one trick we can employ, we can click on our Remove Color tool. We click here, and it will bring up a dialog box. It will look something like that. And so now we got to pick out our source color. So I'm just going to take the cursor. I like to go down in the corner here. That's probably the darkest point. Go ahead and click, and it locks in my cyan, magenta, yellow, and black value for that particular black. I'll go ahead and save that setting, and now I can adjust the tolerance, which is basically adjusting the range above and below our particular set point, and have the RIP start knocking out the black. Let's see if we bump that tolerance up to 3, if I can get a little bit more of that black out of there. There we go. So the majority of the black is gone. Basically all we have are the translucent parts of the octopus and his big giant melon brain. Okay, let's go to next here. I've got my coverage spot channel fill up percentage, which is controlling the white, set at 150%. But if I want to put this on a black shirt, I'm going to want to bump that up to 200%. Now you see how it brightens up this area here? That means that more white is going to be laid down by these process colors. But then again, just to make sure that I get a good release, I'm going to use my multiplicate spot color, and I'm going to bump that factor up to 1.50, which is basically me telling the RIP to add an extra half pass of white so I can make sure to build up that toner layer so I get a clean weed. As far as the underfilling is concerned, I always like to go a minimum 2 device pixels just to make sure there's no stray outline white outside of the design. And since this is a bitmap, I always like to click Preserve Partial Transparency, which will allow natural fading if there's natural fading in the graphic. So let's click on our next button, and let's go ahead and set this up. Now at the moment, I've got this configured for dark media. Using this screening configuration is my way of telling the RIP that I'm going on to a black t-shirt. And I'm going to go ahead and set my mask here. Notice here that we've got a range between 10 and 40 in increments of 5. Mask controls the actual size of the dropout dot. I'm going to go with the standard 25, which is mid-range here. Now, as far as shadow tolerance is concerned, this controls basically the dropout of background versus foreground. Now, since we used our remove color tool to knock out most of that background black, whatever detail is left I want to capture, so I'm going to select remove less dark colors. The dot shape I'm going to leave at Euclidean. I'm going to make the angle 45 degrees from portrait. I'm going to go ahead and set up for user type 1. Which is the default 8432 WT setting for forever low temp laser dark. And I'm going to set my input tray for automatic tray detection just to make sure I don't have to get up and press the online button. I've got my ICC color profile set. If you are running version 2.40, this is correct. We can also select no ICC profile if you're running an earlier version, because we essentially established the profile in step 1 of the TransferRIP. So at that point, I'll go ahead and print and send that job to the printer. Now the next graphic I want to tackle, and let me back up a bit. Here we have a graphic where we've got predominantly black and white, but we also have some more varying colors here. So the secret to graphics like this is making sure we get enough white behind the lighter areas of the design while knocking out areas of the black design, because if I'm going onto a black t-shirt, I don't necessarily need to print black on black. So here we are, caution, rogue robots. All right, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set my substrate color so I can see how this is going to look against a black garment. Okay, so you notice here we've got all these varying shades of black going on within the design. But we've also got a lot of color where we're having to lay down white, including all of our process colors of our various escaping robots. So, like with any bitmap, I'm going to bump up my brightness 2 to 3 points. We'll notice a shift in the print preview. And I like to increase my saturation as well. Now, this time I'm not going to use the remove color tool. You see how a lot of this black is in the background? We're going to use another tool in the TransferRIP on step 5. And let me get there real quick. But first, we got to do our spot channel fill up. Since this is going on to a black shirt, you notice the little asterisk here at 200%. That's Forever's recommended setting for a dark garment. And like I said, I always like to do at least a 2 device pixel underfilling, which is essentially the same as choking. Basically keeps the white from getting on the edge of the graphic where we don't intend. And I'm going to preserve partial transparency. Now, when I go to the last screen here, I still have this screened as a mask for dark media. Again, this is telling the Forever TransferRIP we are going on to a black t-shirt. I'm going to go ahead and leave the mask at 25, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and adjust this shadow tolerance. Just to give you an idea, I reset the shadow tolerance on this particular graphic to 125. I'm going to keep that Euclidean dot shape. I'm going to adjust the angle here slightly because this is a graphic that is not nearly as tall as the other one. So let me readjust that angle. I never mess with the highlights and the shadows. I always leave these 2 settings constant. Remember, if we're going to an 8432, we set our media type to user type 1. We set our input tray to automatic tray detection so that we do not have to press the online button when we send this job through. Okay, let me go back and let's select one more graphic to play with today. This nice portrait compliments of Forever Paper. This guy here, you know, part-time Jedi Knight, fun at parties, I'm telling you. Really good guy. So let's go ahead and pull him up. Let our rip go through the ripping process. Yeah, this file here is a slightly bigger file than the other 2. There we go. Okay. Now you'll notice here what we essentially have is a black and white portrait. Now, when it comes to a black and white portrait, I like to adjust the brightness because, like I said, in my opinion, all bitmaps tend to print a little darker, but I'm not going to adjust the contrast, saturation, or hue because I kind of want to keep this black and white integrity, so to speak. Now again, if I were to click on my Remove Color tool and tell the RIP to knock out the background black, and we could just play around with it for a second. I can go ahead and pick my source color, tell it to save. But just to kind of show you what happens if that's the method that you employ, when you start knocking out the background black, you see how you get this tremendous amount of dropout here within the design. Now, I could get away with this trick when I kind of had an open design like that octopus. But here, I'm probably going to lose some detail if I employ that method. So, let me disengage the remove color, so to speak. And again, set my white channel fill. But again, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to use this shadow tolerance tool to help knock out the background black. Now, given the size of this graphic and the fact that all of my graphic is essentially a full fill, I'm dropping the mask from 25 to 20. But what that means is I'm making that dropout dot bigger. So be mindful. And I'm going to reset the shadow tolerance here to 150. Now, when I do that, I'm going to produce 2 prints. I'm going to go ahead and do one at 100 and then one at 150 so you can see the difference in the print by adjusting the shadow tolerance. Again, this will help us remove that background black, but it'll also let us keep some of the detail in the facing so we get a much smoother portrait print. Again, I'm going to make sure that my media type is set to user type 1 on an 8432 WT. Make sure my input tray is set to automatic tray detection. And again, if you're running a version of the TransferRIP older than version 2.40, don't employ the ICC profile. Let's go ahead, send that to the printer, get that on its way, and Sprite, get me back to camera view. All right, so now we're back. So again, just some of the tricks that you can employ in the TransferRIP. One is to adjust your multiplicate spot color so that you can add a little bit more white behind those lighter areas, and the white itself gives you a little extra toner layer. So when you lay down the B sheet against that A foil, the B sheet feels that toner layer and you get a nice clean weed. It will help when you transition over to your garment. Some of the other tricks that you can employ to knock out that background black, besides the remove color feature, is the shadow tolerance feature. So play around with it at your shop with a couple of graphics and see what you think. But in the meantime, I got the output here off the 8432, so we're going to go ahead and get some started. Just to show you, this is the Octopus print, and I'll hold it over both cameras so that everybody can get a good look. Now, let's go ahead and discuss how I've got the heat press set up. Now, the heat press I'm using is my handy dandy super trusty Geonite DK20S from George Knight Company. We love George Knight presses. As a matter of fact, George Knight loves presses so much, they've been making presses since the 1860s. So when it comes to me in the T-shirt transfer paper power half hour, I like to use my George Knight DK20S. And what I'm doing here is I am preheating the bottom platen. Now, this is important when we get started with our first few transfers, because with that bottom platen warm, we can use it to dry out our B sheet, and we can use it to get a nice smooth peel when we separate the A sheet and the B sheet. Now, I've got this preheated now for about 30 seconds. It should be good enough. Just to let you know, since this graphic is predominantly white, let's cover some of the adjustments that I made to my George Knight DK20S as I dry out my B sheet for a couple of seconds. When it lays flat, it's nice and dry. I can go ahead and place it over my A foil, put a protective cover sheet over it. This is just basically butcher paper. Swing the press over, lock it into position. Now, if you remember last episode, there are 3 ways that we can go about getting more successful weed attempts whenever we're dealing with a predominantly white graphic. Remember, in most cases when we lay down white, we're basically putting down a single toner layer. The B sheet is designed essentially to look for a multiple toner layer, something a little thicker. So if we don't want to use the RIP to lay down a little excess white to make weeding easier, then basically we're going to have to make some adjustments to our heat press. Now, what we can essentially adjust is temperature, time, and pressure. Now, my experience of working with 2-step self-weeding papers is once you find the right pressure where you're getting consistent weeding results, I don't like to mess with the pressure. So what I did with this setup that's a little different from previous setups, normally when I'm pressing an A sheet and B sheet that's 11 by 17 size in the Forever LowTemp Laser Dark, I press those for 2 minutes. But since my graphic is predominantly white, what I did was I increased the dwell time 15 to 20 seconds, basically to give that B sheet a little extra time to fuse against that toner on the A foil. The other thing that I did was I raised my temperature 10 degrees above what I would normally have this heat press set for. Again, using a little extra heat to drive the emulsion off the B sheet. Now, we're going to go ahead and weed this one to make sure it turns out. If those adjustments don't work for you, then what you need to do is adjust your pressure. And that usually means taking your pressure knob and turning it 1 full revolution turn. If you have an air-operated heat press, that means increasing your pressure by an extra 10 to 15 psi. But when you increase the pressure, what you run the risk of is getting what I call a snowing effect around the design. In other words, stray dots from the B sheet that have stuck to the A foil where you didn't intend to lay white down. Now, if you do a trim or a scrape, you can get rid of those excess dots and you can still salvage the print, but it really slows down your production time. So let's check this print out. Pardon me. I'm going to remove my cover sheet. And whenever I separate the B sheet from the A foil, I like to run from one corner to the other, nice and slow. And also, I like to keep that A foil against that warm platen so that I can do a nice slow weed. Like so. So now, I've got my A foil sheet with my design, with the B adhesive on the back. And if we've done the process correctly, may be difficult for the camera to pick up, but we should see a perfect indentation of our design within the B sheet. If you see that, you are good to go. All right, so let's get rolling with our next graphic, which was the Rogue Robots. That's what the graphic looks like after I select Screen for Dark. Now, the one thing I notice here is I do have some black pixels that's still printed out up here in the background. But that's because I wanted to capture the shading of that background, so to speak. So those pixels are going to help us do it. Now remember, this was the first print that we tried where we adjusted the shadow tolerance. So let's run through the steps. I'm going to preheat my B sheet on the warm platen. Make sure it flattens out. Put B sheet over A foil. Cover it with a protective sheet. And again, instead of adjusting the pressure, now remember, if we were to adjust the pressure by 1 full revolution turn tighter or 10 to 15 psi, we basically want to go with the regular settings, which is 310 to 330 Fahrenheit for 2 minutes. Now, like I said, I'm going the direction of adding a little bit more temperature and a little bit more time because they're easier to adjust. And again, I want to avoid getting the white spots on my design. So while that's cooking up here, let me go ahead and grab my scissors and we will get this design prepped by cutting away the excess film. What this helps to ensure is that if we got any edging from the B sheet onto the edge of this A foil, it doesn't appear as a box around our design. I don't necessarily have to trim to the edge. As a matter of fact, what I want to do is leave about an inch around my design. So when I roll that design off of my t-shirt, it will roll off clean and not catch an edge, so to speak. If you leave that gap too narrow, so to speak, and you try to lift up on the film, inevitably you're going to pick at a corner. It's going to pop that corner up, what we call around here nipping the corner, so to speak. We don't want to do that. We want a clean weed. So we've got that one cooking up. And while that one's cooking up, I wanted to show you the 2 examples of the Mark Hamill, aka Luke Skywalker design. The first one here, and I'm going to put my silicone sheet behind it to make it a little easier to see. I'm going to hold it straight up in front of the camera. You could see these black pixels. Even though we had said in the RIP that we want to screen for printer, and screening for printer would normally knock out black, but you see how it left these residue pixels whenever I had my screening option set at 100. let's go ahead and weed this, and I'll show you the result at 150. Remove cover sheet. And again, we're going to go from one corner to opposite corner. Slow peel. I don't have to rush it. As long as the A foil stays against the bottom platen. Like so. Okay. That looks like a good weed attempt there. Let's get back to the Mark Hamill image. Again, I showed you with the shadow tolerance set at 100, we still have this background black here. Here is the print where we bumped up the shadow tolerance to 175. And again, I'm just going to add this paper. And as you'll notice, that black background is gone. Now, I still have a little bit of dropout here in the design where there was black, but as you can see, I'm capturing more detail in the interior whenever I use the shadow tolerance as opposed to the remove color tool. So again, I would definitely employ this trick whenever you're dealing with portraits or whenever you're dealing with a design where you've got some interior black but predominantly white. Like I said, we were able to use the knockout tool, so to speak, or the color removal tool to work with the Octopus, but that was just the benefit of the graphic itself, so to speak. So best advice is you got to analyze these graphics on your own and kind of figure out which tools you want to implement. But remember, we can always generate a print preview of our design before we send it to the printer. And we do have that print preview button in the last page of the TransferRIP. So when we're in the print preview, we can see how individual spot colors lay down. We can also see how all colors will look. And we can also set to where it shows the colors in black so that we can basically see the concentration of toner that's going to get deposited on the page. The darker the areas, the more toner is accumulated there. The lighter the areas, less toner. So in a way, you can kind of gauge which part of your graphic is going to feel a little heavier on the garment and which is going to feel a little lighter. So let's go ahead, give our platen a preheat. Let me grab a B sheet. There we go. Put that on there for a couple of seconds just to let it cool, or pardon me, just to warm it up. Remember, when you see your B sheet go flat, that means all the moisture is driven out of it, and we're ready to lay it over our A foil. Always cover with protective paper because we are dealing with an adhesive, and you don't necessarily want that adhesive to ooze out from between the sheets and get on the platen of your press. Now, when that one comes out, we'll be ready to actually make some t-shirts, and what we're going to do is we have got a new type of silicone sheet in. This is from Forever Paper, and it's called their gloss finishing sheet. Now, like a standard matte silicone sheet, we could take this sheet and reuse it a number of times as long as the surface stays clean. But if you'll notice, and it may be hard to pick up with the camera, but there's definitely a shiny side to this silicone sheet. What that's going to do is it's going to help us keep the shine that's in that design. Anybody who's ever worked with the Forever LowTemp Laser Dark knows that when you first roll the material, roll the A foil off of your garment, it has that shiny, glossy, almost heat-applied vinyl look. Now, most people prefer to have a matte finish to their design, but some people actually like the shiny bright. So, we still have to do a finishing press in order to set that emulsion and toner into the garment. So, by using a gloss finish sheet, you can basically keep the integrity of that shine while still being able to do your finishing press and set the emulsion. So, again, gloss finishing sheets, They're available in 11-inch by 16-inch size. We have them in a 25 sheet pack, or we have them in a 200 sheet case, available now at Condé. So I got about 45 seconds left on the Jedi Master Luke. Let's go ahead and grab my t-shirts that I'm going to use. And for today's presentation, I'm going to be putting these on Hanes Beefy Tee 100% cotton heavyweight t-shirts. I love the Hanes Beefy Tee personally because it's a good heavyweight cotton. There's no chemical sizing agent in here that's going to wreak havoc with our transfer, and it pretty much keeps its shape even after multiple washings. So good t-shirt to use if you're decorating. Maybe over the course of some more transfer paper power half hours, we can play around with some other manufacturers' shirts, see how they compare to the Hanes Beefy Tee. But like I said, Hanes Beefy Tee is how I roll. Timer's up. Let's go ahead and remove our top protective sheet. And again, we want to do a low and slow peel while keeping the A foil against that bottom platen. And it's like I can see the screen design in the B sheet. That is looking really good. Okay, so now we have our emulsion set to the back of the B. Once the B is used, it goes in the trash can. Let's go ahead and make our first t-shirt. I'm going to take my Hanes Beefy Tee, put it on the platen of my press, square up the t-shirt as best I can. If there's any lint or contaminants, that's why we have a sticky lint roller. Yes, down south we call them sticky lint rollers. I know it's redundant, but then again, so am I. All right, we get the contaminants off. I'm going to use my copy paper. Give my shirt a quick 5 to 10 second pre-press just to make sure there is no moisture in the shirt. Flatten out that area, got a nice smooth area to work with. Let's take our Octopus, place him where we want him to appear. Going to use my butcher paper sheet, and I'm just going to press at the standard 310 to 330 Fahrenheit for 30 seconds with a medium to heavy pressure. Now remember, if we had to use the trick of adjusting our pressure one full turn to get a better weed off of a single white layer, remember to dial that pressure back when you apply to your shirt. Pardon me, if you leave that extra turn pressure and you try to apply, it's going to feel, you're going to crush it with pressure. And if we do that, we might have issue getting the material off the shirt. But there is our design. And remember, we want to cold peel these designs here. So let me set this off to the side. Let me grab my next shirt. And let's work on our next one. Again, I'm using this protective paper just in case there are any contaminants on the surface of my DK20S platen. It can happen around here at Condé. We like to do all kinds of experiments and tests. Go ahead and take my Rogue robots, place them across where I want them to appear. Cover sheet. And again, 30 seconds at 310 to 330 Fahrenheit for 100% cotton. Now, if we were going onto a cotton poly blend or 100% polyester, remember to drop your platen temperature before you apply to those synthetic materials. If you need guidance, the instructions are available on our website. That's Condé.com or dietrans.com. That's 30 seconds there. Remove that protective sheet. And there is design number 2, done with our enhanced techniques on Forever Low Temp Laser Dark. Let's throw that one off to the side, and let's work on our last shirt here. Square it, lint roll if necessary, using a sticky lint roller. Cover with protective paper, preheat. Remember, it only takes about 5 to 10 seconds. We're just trying to drive out the moisture. Got a nice smooth area. Let's line up Mr. Himmel. Now, what's fun about this graphic is, of course, his head's at an angle, but the text down at the bottom is straight. There we go. We'll cover. Press for 30 seconds. Now I am going to have my gloss finishing sheet and my matte finishing sheet. Let's set those there. I think I'm done with the sticky lint roller for now. Okay, 2, 1, got it. Let's set him off to the side to cool. And let's go ahead and grab our first shirt, which was the Octopus, right? If you can get me the overhead view. Okay, can everyone see that? Hope so. Now remember, when it comes to white graphics, we definitely want to make sure that this A foil has cooled down against the garment. Now, that might mean waiting a little longer than a typical multicolor design to remove the film. What I'm doing here is using a cool piece of Chromolux textured aluminum and using it to remove the heat. Basically what we call in the industry cheating. Now what I want to do is test the graphic where I start to get a good roll, and as soon as it releases, I want to roll the design. I don't want to lift, because if I lift, some of those dots are going to want to stay on the A foil sheet, not release clean. So remember, we roll, we do not lift. And there's our design. Now, I kind of like this shiny octopi. Let's go ahead and keep the shine to them by using the gloss finishing sheet. We just simply lay the shiny side down over our graphic. And again, protective paper, because I'm just being cautious. And we want to do another 30-second pre-press. Same temperature, same time, same pressure. Okay, we're just using the silicone sheet so we can basically set that emulsion and toner into the fabric. Should be good enough there. Let's carefully remove. And like I said, as long as the sheet stays clean, we can use it on our next attempt. And another thing we can do Let's give this shirt a little stretchy stretch from side to side. Help soften it up. But there is our deep sea octopus against the black shirt. I think that turned out pretty cool. Let's try our next example, which was the rogue robots. Again, make sure that A-foil is cool. Start at a corner where we've got a heavy toner lay down. There we go. And remember, roll the design, don't lift. There we go. Now, I can still see some of the black dotting in here. And like I said, that's basically what kind of gives us that textured look background. For this one, let's use the matte finishing sheet. Cover it with our protective paper. And let's give that one a finish. When it comes to the finishing press, recommend going a full 30 seconds. If you do the stretch after it comes out of the press and you've maybe stretched a little hard, your image gets a little lopsided, so to speak, which can happen with like a square or rectangle design, no worry. Just lay the silicone sheet back over it, repress it, and then reshape it. You're not going to do any harm. So, there is our rogue robots on our dark garment. And now for the coup de grace, let's see how our black and white portrait turned out. Okay. Now, use the same trick as last time. I'm going to cover it with this aluminum. And the reason I'm doing this is because, you know, metal is a great conductor of heat. So it kind of allows us to get the heat out of that A-foil quickly. And again, going to kind of start at a corner, so to speak. Roll down. There we go. Now, if we haven't left it cool long enough, we're probably going to tell when we get to this thin text here, because it will want to drop out, so to speak. But if you let it cool enough, you should get nice clean text. So, there's our Jedi Master. And let's go ahead and set him. I'm going to use a matte finishing sheet. Cover with protective paper. And again, we do our finishing press at the same temperature that we use to apply the low temp, between 310 to 330 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 seconds. Like I said, I like adjusting the temperature and time when setting the A-foil to B sheet so I don't have to mess with the pressure. And I am going to lay this down so that we could see over the top. And I'm telling you, that's a soft feeling design. This has really turned out well. So, again, some of my tips and techniques involving the forever transfer rip, as well as some settings on your swing away heat press so that you can get more successful attempts dealing with predominantly white graphics onto dark garments. So, hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope you enjoy that flash sale on the Forever Flex Off material. You're welcome. If you have any questions about this episode or anything we've covered in the past, remember the email, ttppHH@condé.com. We will address it and get back to you. We appreciate you tuning in. The next episode of the T-Shirt Transfer Paper Power Half Hour will be on Tuesday, February 2nd, 3:30 p.m. Hope you tune in. We'll have a great topic for you. We'll have fun making some transfers. Until then, I'm Doug DeWitt, your Transfer Paper Product Manager here at Condé Systems. My time's up, and I thank you for yours.